You're listening to my cousin DLils on
It's DLils you rockin' with hip hop and home runs. We don't criticize pros, man, it's all fun. Urban media, yeah, we talking sports, debating issues, spitting game on and off the court. It's hip hop and home runs.
hip hop and home runs.com.
All right, we're back from a long-awaited break. It's your boy DLils. We're on hiphopandhomeruns.com. We're right in the midst of the beginning of the NBA playoffs. The seedings haven't quite been set yet, so I want to talk about that. I want to touch about some things that's been going on in the NFL. But first, I just want to jump into an article that's on hiphopandhomeruns.com right now. The dichotomy of the black quarterback. One of my best pieces yet. Basically, I talk about how the difference in treatment between black quarterbacks versus their white counterparts in the NFL, as far as I go a little bit deeper into the light skin versus dark skin fallacies. And it's a very interesting article. I've received a lot of feedback from it already on a national stage. So I encourage anyone who hasn't yet read that article, go ahead to www.hiphopandhomeruns.com and go ahead and check that article out. It's the first one on the page. And leave your comments. I'm always down to hear what my followers have to say, and I will do a follow-up rebuttal to that if I see any interesting comments out there. So go ahead and check that out. I want to get right into the NBA right now. We're in the midst of a serious MVP race, and there's a couple of things that, personally, I would like to clarify as far as where I stand. If you go back and look at my January article on my midseason awards, I talked about how I felt Damian Lillard was the league's MVP halfway through the season. And at this point, I certainly don't think Damian has fell off, so to speak. It's just that people have kind of rose to the front of that race and kind of passed him. The Portland Trailblazers are still, I believe, ranked 5th in the Western Conference right now standings. And pretty much positions 2 through 6 could change overnight. So we're not quite sure yet of who's going to play who. I'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, I'd have to give my current MVP to LeBron James. And I'll get back to that in a second. I want to talk about who I believe will get it and who I believe deserves it. Right now, there's not a question in my mind. Steph Curry will receive the NBA's Most Valuable Player award, given out by the media each year. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that LeBron James once again is that most valuable player. And it's kind of easy for me to select that based on the criteria that we look at for MVP and what he means to the team, what he means to the overall league. But first, let's talk about Steph. So Steph, not to take anything away, he's had a marvelous season. There's a couple things that we need to consider. Okay, when we talk about Steph Curry as this year's 2014-2015 National Basketball Association Most Valuable Player. One thing kind of going against Steph, in my opinion, is the fact he has a new coach. Steve Kerr has done a great job of leading the Dubs to not only the best team in the Western Conference in the league, but statistically they break down as one of the best teams in the league as well. You talk about they're number 1 in overall defensive efficiency right now, and they've stayed in the top 3 throughout the season. Playing in the West, that means a lot. That doesn't necessarily take away from what Steph does, but what it does say is that, hey, I have to pay attention to these stats as well. I have to pay attention to the fact that Steve Kerr has joined this team, and they were already a playoff contender. Now they're a number 1 seed. I have to recognize that. I have to recognize that Klay Thompson is having a career year, also averaging over 20 points per game. I have to recognize that Draymond Green is having a career year and being considered as a max player, which I'll talk about on my next podcast. Okay, we're talking about players that potentially 3 max players. Andre Iguodala, who's traded, who's already a max player. Excuse me. So when you add all that into consideration, it's hard for me to give Steph Curry my Most Valuable Player award. You want to talk about Andrew Bogut has been healthy. You have a deeper bench, bringing Sean Livingston, David Lee, Iggy. I mean, they have Justin Holiday, Drew's younger brother. I mean, this team is absolutely loaded. So, in terms of the most valuable player, yeah, Steph means a lot. He's the spark plug on this team, but is he the most valuable player in the NBA? No, he's not. LeBron James is, and here's why. LeBron does it on both ends. Clearly could arguably be in the top 5 in defensive MVP votes every year. He'll also make first team All-NBA defensive team this year. To me, there's no such thing as MVP fatigue. I hear that a lot talked about on the major media networks. Voters get tired of voting in LeBron. I think that's absolutely nonsense. How can you get tired of voting in whoever is the best player of the league? If he's proving year in, year out to be the best player, he needs to continue to be voted as such. We always talk about, in retrospect, how Michael Jordan probably was snubbed of the many most valuable player awards he should have been, selected for. Let's not do that a second time. If we know there's greatness out there and we see it every day, then let's reward that greatness for what it truly should be, and that's the most valuable player. If you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, who also sit second in the East, they're not a scrub team. They are ranked second overall in the East. Without LeBron, they're a 500 team. James Harden, you can make the argument that he's been doing an exceptional job for Houston, which he has. To me, if you're not going to give the MVP trophy to LeBron, you have to give it to James Harden for what he's done. I mean, he's truly carried a very subpar Rockets team with no backcourt help, really no front court help without Dwight, and pretty much him and Trevor Ariza have been balling. And Trevor's pretty much held it down defensively. James has held it down offensively. And then I'm talking about on a night in and night out basis. I'd have to give my MVP to James Harden after LeBron James. But, another thing to kind of help out my argument, if you look at the Miami Heat, what's happened to them this season, they're on the brink of not even making the playoffs. I'm pretty sure they won't make it at this point, even after getting Goran Dragic in the trade deadline. Even after drafting Shabazz Napier and the emergence of Hassan Whiteside, they're still probably not going to make the playoffs. And that just shows you the deficit that LeBron leaves when he's not on your team, how he can take you from the number 1, number 2 contender to not even in the playoffs. So that's how I feel about MVP. LeBron James should be the MVP right now. Moving on, while we have these Western Conference standings right now, I want to talk about interesting first round matchups on both sides. Let's take a look at the West first. So I believe the most interesting matchup in the first round, potentially as it stands right now, the Spurs will play the Clippers. That's going to be tough because the Spurs are rolling right now, and the Clippers need this. They need this as a franchise. Chris Paul needs this to try to help build upon his legacy, as well as there's a lot of reasons why the Clippers need this. This will be the third time the Clippers failed to reach the second round in the CP3 era. I know this is Doc's second season, but it's time for them to make that, to get over that hump. It'd be the third time in CP3's era. Also, if you miss out on the first round this year, you have DeAndre Jordan, who is an, I believe, unrestricted free agent. I'll have to clarify that for you guys, but him as a free agent, that's huge, because if you lose him, you lose a lot of defensive intensity, you lose a lot of gut and grit that you had on your front line, and he pretty much was the bully on this team. He struck fear into other teams. So you lose him, you're losing a large part of that defensive unit. And this should be a wake-up call for Clippers fans, because your team can't get much better than you are right now. You have solidified the center and power forward position in Blake and DeAndre. There's really not much farther you can go up unless you're going to have LeBron and, KD play at the forwards position. You have arguably the best point guard in the league. You have plenty of shooting in J.J. Redick. You have Jamal Crawford coming off the bench. You add Austin Rivers, who I believe will help this team in the future. Maybe not this year, but going forward, he may be the shooting guard that they're truly looking for. that explosive wing player. But this is bad news. They lose to the Spurs this year or lose to anyone else in the first round. I mean, this team is not going to look the same next year. Okay, let's shift our attention to the Eastern Conference. Eastern Conference, a lot of bad matchups, but what I see is an intriguing matchup in the first round will be the Bulls versus the Wizards. You have the matchup of the two number one former overall picks in D. Rose versus John Wall. Both have equal athleticism. In fact, I go as far to say that John Wall has more athleticism right now than Derrick Rose coming off these injuries. Although Derrick has looked good in recent games since he came back. I like to see the impact that Paul Pierce is going to have on this Wizards team. He came here for this reason, to be a closer in the playoffs, to give some veteran experience, to really provide some depth and some pretty much leadership to the younger guys on this team. It's a really young team, so will he have an impact if they play against the Bulls? I'm not sure. Especially with a Tom Thibodeau who knows Paul Pierce's game, and I pretty much feel like he can be his game can pretty much be canceled out with the defense of Jimmy Butler. So, and then of course there's the Tom Thibodeau exit rumors. A lot of people are saying, a lot of folks in the media and insiders everywhere are saying that this is Tom's final season, that the general manager of the Chicago Bulls is pretty much fed up with Thibodeau's style. He doesn't really get the most out of his players. So I think that's foolishness and a debauchery, but he is looking to be fired after the season. That's what the rumors are saying. So I feel like that's going to be a real interesting matchup in the East if the Wizards see the Bulls in the first round. Shifting our focus to the NFL briefly, which I'm going to be doing an NFL podcast a little bit later this week as well. Which two teams I believe, one in each NFC and AFC, will not make the playoffs. I go as far as to say that I strongly believe that the Arizona Cardinals will not make the playoffs this year in the NFC. I think that the 49ers will bounce back. I think the Seahawks aren't going anywhere. I think it will be very difficult for the Cardinals to get in the playoffs, especially without improving on their running game. Yes, I know they got the guard from the 49ers to help them out, but you lose Cromartie. Tyrann Mathieu is going to have to play a lot more of that safety corner nickel slot. He's going to be asked to do a lot, and he hasn't really been staying on the field healthy all 16 games the past couple of seasons. So I do believe Arizona is going to fall. And if we shift our attention to the AFC, I don't believe that the Bengals will make the playoffs this year. I know they've been pretty consistent in being one and done when it comes to the playoffs, but this year I think that Marvin Lewis loses his job in the offseason. He should have already lost his job personally. They come back with the two-headed monster of Gio and the other guy, what was it, Blue from LSU. They're going to continue to have a tough running game, but as long as you have Green out there pretty much by himself and the other receivers around him, teams are really going to key off on that. And I think they went down a little bit defensively also. They lost Terrence Newman in the offseason. Pac-Man is a year older. A lot of these younger rookie corners and that haven't really been getting too much playing time are going to have to step up and really play a lot. So I think that will hurt them. I think that Pittsburgh and Baltimore got better, and that leaves Cincinnati on the outside looking at. And another thing I want to bring up in the NFL in regards to, kind of stemming off the dichotomy of the black quarterback article on hiphopandhomeruns.com right now. You have Mike Vick, who still hasn't been picked up in free agency yet. A lot of rumors, a lot of speculation. Right now, it appears as though Mike Vick isn't going to get picked up until after the NFL draft, and people really kind of fill out their rosters with these rookies before a team actually elects to bring in a veteran quarterback of Mike Vick's reputation. My personal opinion, I think that he will be a great fit for either the Washington Redskins. That will put him back in his native area. He can be kind of that veteran guy to RG3 that he's need. RG3 has never had someone in support of him since he's been there. it's always been people in competition with him. And although Mike Vick will bring healthy competition, I believe it'd be better for him to, kind of mentor RG3, allow him to build his confidence back up, as well as you won't have to change the offense if RG3 gets hurt, which we know he's injury prone. You'll be able to have Mike Vick step right in, who's very familiar with the division, in the NFC and overall, and I believe he will be a great addition as a backup quarterback to that team. If not, there's 5 or 6 teams that still are relying on these rookie quarterbacks. Everybody from Jacksonville, who's gotten a lot in the offseason, I would be open to seeing him go to a Jacksonville team and really adding some competition to that AFC South and Andrew Luck, as well as the Houston Texans. Ryan Mallett didn't really fare out last season because of injury. I think that you bring Mike Vick in to compete with them. They already have a steady run game and a great defense. That might be all he needs. Mike Vick has never had an excellent defense like the Houston Texans have. So, just wanted to touch base with you guys. Go ahead and tune in on Thursday of this week. You'll see a fresh podcast where I touch more about the NFL and free agency, as well as some behind the scenes. We talk about Tiger and what's going on with him. Go ahead and tune in. This is hiphopandhomeruns.com. It's your boy DLils.